In this video, I'd like to cover a few more basic underlying patterns, some of Pete Best's embellishments, and Ringo's changing approach to the cymbals in his early performances with the Beatles. So let's get to the studio. I'm joined once again by Ann Arbor drummer Billy Harrington at Bottle Rocket Recorders. The tom-toms are usually noted for the rhythmically propulsive fills that carry one song from one section to the next, and we'll cover that in a later video. But the toms can also carry basic patterns, partly for color contrast against the snare. Perhaps due to associations with non-Western cultures that were considered primitive, reliance on the toms might signify a primal quality. Billy, can you demonstrate the special effect that Ringo gets by dividing all beats on the floor tom while playing the surf backbeat on the snare, as he does in the song Money?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3.
Great. And the Beatles' December 1962 cover of Sheila has a particularly tribal sound with its rapid subdivisions of tom-tom beats. Can we hear some of Sheila?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Or the tom pattern might be quite distinctive, as in Ringo's 1963 performances of Chuck Berry's Memphis.
1, 2, 3, 4.
But the Beatles' recording career actually begins at an opposite side of the sonic spectrum. Instead of playing the drum heads on P.S. I Love You in September 1962, Ringo's substitute for one session, Andy White, plays a pattern not by battering the snare head, but with some kind of cross-sticking, perhaps with the snares off, that brings out a clicking sound meshed with Ringo's maracas. Ringo is heard cross-sticking when he plays this song with the Beatles on a June 1963 BBC performance. Can you demonstrate different cross-sticking techniques, both with the snares engaged and with the snares released?
Yeah. So this is with the snares engaged. 1, 2, 3, 4. Snares disengaged. Has a bit more of a hollow sound. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Great. And we've talked about a funny instance in the film A Hard Day's Night where Ringo is shown introducing the band in If I Fell. He's shown, well, you explain.
Sure. In the recording, Ringo plays the intro like this. 1, 2, 3. In the film, Ringo mimes it like this. 1, 2, 3.
I know of only a few other songs in which Ringo gets this clicking sound from his cross-sticking, including a single July 1963 BBC performance of the Honeymoon song, Bound by Love, and a number of stage and BBC performances of Till There Was You, all from 1963, both before and after the July recording session in which Ringo played bongos and George his Spanish classical guitar for a change of color to the more subdued sounds they got there. But the fall 1962 studio versions of P.S. I Love You with Andy White on drums and Ask Me Why with Ringo both feature this cross-sticking sound. In How Do You Do It, Ringo seems to move from tapping the closed hi-hat in verses to the ride cymbal in the song's middle sections. Otherwise, there's little to no cymbal work in these first EMI sessions. One wonders if producer George Martin had requested this quieted approach, and if so, if it were due more to expressive ideals or to difficulties in separating and balancing the loud drums captured with just two microphones against the acoustic guitars, a weak signal from the bass, and vocals. Ringo's bass drum typically grounds the band with accented, strong beats. Billy, can we hear the bass drum alone for a few bars and then add a backbeat on the snare and hi-hat?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
But occasionally, the bass drum gets the spotlight, and we might first think of the Beatles song The End from Abbey Road, in which continuous beat divisions on the bass drum open the long drum solo. But this effect is already heard on a much smaller scale in 3 different recordings made within the space of a month in February and March 1963. And do you want to know a secret? A moment of stop time in which everything but the bass drum is silenced suggests suddenly exposed heartbeats and whispers. Ringo plays the bass drum alone for textural variety in moments in Thank You Girl and One After 909. Billy, can you remind us again of those bass drum heartbeats by playing the end of the second verse of Secret?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
In September of 1963, Ringo creates a moment of 4 on the floor by playing all 4 beats on the bass drum in ushering in the middle section, the bridge of All I've Got to Do. Billy, could you play a few bars from that song, say from the end of the second verse into the beginning of the bridge?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3.
While Pete and Ringo both relied heavily on the backbeat, their playing can be distinguished in a couple of ways. First, in Hamburg and for the Decca audition, Pete would often move from one section of a song to another with rapid snare subdivisions. We hear this as the introduction to Cry for a Shadow moves into the song proper. Billy, could you play a similar passage from the bridge into a returning verse of Ain't She Sweet? We'll hear here a surf backbeat in each section, interrupted with a climactic snare flourish in between.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Swinging. Great. This use of the snare is extremely uncommon in Ringo's playing, but he does end sections of How Do You Do It with snare fills, and he brings Please Please Me to a halt with a few very short such flashes. As both of these tracks are from the same fall 1962 sessions in which Ringo is heard tapping the snare rim, I wonder if this unusual approach for Ringo may have been dictated by Martin. Pete actually plays an extended snare roll in the middle of the bridge of Crying, Waiting, Hoping. Billy, can we hear a drum roll? Not before 1965's Nowhere Man does Ringo play a drum roll on a Beatle recording, and then it would be another 2 years before he would do the same on the introduction to All You Need Is Love. Instead, Ringo will play very short and rapid, rudiment-like snare subdivisions at the opening of the highly active Twist and Shout. But this itself is rare. Such rapid playing is normally done on the toms. So Billy, could you give us the opening of the drum part for Twist and Shout?
Sure. 1, 2, 3.
From the evidence we have, Ringo seems to use his cymbals more often and more loudly as 1963 goes along. It's unclear whether this may have been due to the Beatles' emerging style or to an almost desperate effort to be heard above the noise generated by audiences, just as their amplifiers had to grow more powerful, or to growth in Ringo's oral imagination, which may have been pushed by the composing Beatles, who would later claim they always told Ringo what to play. It's also possible that this impression is partly left by poor recording techniques, particularly with the often weak offline tapes made by fans of radio broadcasts and stage shows from 1962 and 63, which certainly misrepresent subtle cymbal shadings. But a half dozen films taken of Ringo's playing over the last 5 months of 1963 clarify a lot. Considering all audio and video sources, it appears that when sticking the hi-hat, Ringo will keep it closed in early work, but open it partially later on. When maintaining a pattern on the ride cymbal, Ringo seems to move from the light tip of the stick in early work to the weightier shoulder of the stick as he perhaps moves from the cymbal's crown to strike near its edge, all of which generates more sound, ultimately creating a constant cymbal wash, a bright metallic flash behind the Beatles' sound. The crash cymbal, which is used very sparingly before mid-1963, will be covered in a subsequent video. It also seems true that Ringo uses his available resources much more freely after acquiring the first Ludwig kit on May 12, 1963. We might think of the closed hi-hat in such subdued numbers as To Know Her Is to Love Her, played by Pete, or by Ringo's playing in There's a Place or Misery, recorded in February 1963. At the other extreme, Ringo sticks an open hi-hat in July 1963 BBC performances of both So How Come and Lend Me Your Comb. Ringo could be heard playing and suddenly closing his hi-hat through You Really Got a Hold on Me. A hi-hat pattern where it's stuck closed, then momentarily open, then closed again, is the way Ringo accentuates just the title of that July 1963 B-side, I'll Get You, right after the guitar crescendo. And this alternation of closed, open, closed hi-hat is also done in much larger scale, as in I Want to Hold Your Hand, which features an open hi-hat in the rambunctious verses, but then moves to a closed hi-hat for the more contemplative bridges. Billy, can you play the hi-hat alternating closed, then open, then closed quickly, as in I'll Get You?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3.
Right, so Ringo gets that open sound on the hi-hat just to emphasize the title when John and Paul are singing the title of the song. Great. And if you can play the change from verse through the refrain and into the bridge of I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Some have thought that the A side of She Loves You shows evidence of tape edits because of its suddenly changing cymbal sounds. In at least one place, this occurs just for the song title. And these changing cymbal sounds may in fact have been Ringo's attempt to emphasize the title of She Loves You in the same way he does more consistently for the B-side. In considering the Beatles' recordings through 1963, a recording made late in that period on the 17th of October shows a very expressive use of the hi-hat. Ringo sets up the entrance to the bridge of This Boy by rhythmically opening the cymbals with the pedal and then closing them again while tapping with the brushes. Billy, can you demonstrate this for us?
Sure. 1, 2, 3, 4.
We've already shown Ringo's use of brushes in A Taste of Honey and This Boy. These are the only EMI performances before 1965's I've Just Seen a Face, in which I'm aware of their use. And Ringo abandons brushes for both Taste of Honey and This Boy in all stage performances done 4 months or more after each song's recording for EMI. For other expressive uses of the hi-hat, think of the syncopation in Anna, or listen to the striking pedaling in the opening of Please Mr. Postman, which was given a completely new texture in the studio than it had in any prior live performance. And also think of the jauntily syncopated All I've Got to Do. Billy, can we hear some of Anna and the Postman intro?
Yeah, so here's Anna. 1, 2, 3, 4. And Please Mr. Postman. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Although Ringo recorded a few songs on a relatively dry hi-hat cymbal in recordings made through March 1963, he seems to open it up slightly in performances done after May. This appears to be the case with Baby It's You. And in the song Boys, Billy, it's a very dry cymbal sound, and I wondered if you had an idea as to whether he's playing the hi-hat or playing on the bell of the ride cymbal.
Oh, I think it's definitely the ride cymbal. You hear that wash underneath throughout the track, but the recording just happens to pick out that very, definite stick sound of the cymbal.
Yeah, the song Boys characterizes Ringo. He sings it solo. It was the one vocal track he has on that album. It's kind of fitting that there's more sound coming from the drum set in that song. Finally, we should mention that Ringo's raver mode is to strike the ride cymbal on the shoulder of the cymbal with the shoulder of the stick, creating a high degree of energy in songs like Money, and covers of songs by Chuck Berry and Larry Williams. The ending of Long Tall Sally, Ringo always goes into the raver mode in the final chorus. Ringo also gets a loud ride sound like this in later 1963 performances of songs that he'd played more quietly in the studio. Billy, can you show what it's like to play Ride with the tip of the stick on the bell or the crown, and then show Ringo's raver mode with the shoulder at the edge?
Yeah, so Ringo is very expressive with the ride cymbal on his right side. So he might play something like this on the bell. Or the tip of the stick. And when he really wants to amp up the volume, he'll play with the shoulder of the stick on the shoulder of the cymbal.
This effect also colors the instrumental break in Little Child, where a second ride cymbal is punched in along with a blues harp. In this video, we've covered the tom-toms, Ringo's cross-sticking and some rare rapid playing on the snare, and his solo use of the bass drum. We've noted that Ringo's playing seems to get louder through 1963. In a later video, we'll cover some more ideas on rhythm and final aspects of Ringo's early playing style.